Welcome, I am Rael Zeev and your host for Keep Traveling, Your African Vacation, the only podcast which brings you insightful information in the African tourism industry by real tourism professionals. Today is our 10th episode, and I have the pleasure of introducing Adrian Coley, who is Managing Director of Flatdog's Camp. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rael. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Let's start off with whereabouts are you situated and how do you get your guests to you?
So we're in the eastern side of Zambia, right on the boundary of the South Luangwa National Park. So we're on the Luangwa River, which flows from northeast Zambia down into the Zambezi, just to the east of the lower Zambezi National Park. And we're about a 1 hour flight from Lusaka. So most of our guests fly into Lusaka either through Dubai or Doha or Ethiopia or Nairobi or Joburg. And then they catch a little plane up here for an hour, and it's a scheduled flight from Lusaka to Mfiri. And we're about 40 minutes from Mfiri Airport.
You were telling me off air that the commercial flight is done by ProFlight Zambia.
Yeah, exactly. They've serviced Luangwa for 20 odd years now, and they're by far the most reliable and professional of operators, and we're an agent for them. So if anyone wants us to book their flights for them internally, then we're able to do that. But ProFlight, yeah, they're the people that fly up to us.
So I'm assuming you could also do some kind of charter flight if that was necessary as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of charter companies based in Lusaka, so you can charter in, although during what I would say is the high season from sort of May through to the end of November, there's plenty of scheduled flight, so chartering isn't necessary unless you've got a connection you want to meet or something, and then we can put you in touch with people to charter planes up here as well.
Coming from Africa myself, I understand the terminology flat dogs, but some of our international guests might not understand why you've decided to call your camp that. So perhaps you can just fill us in with why it's called Flat Dogs Camp.
Yeah, it goes back to our original business partner when Flat Dogs first started, before me and Jess, my wife, were involved in Flat Dog. A friend of ours called Jake, he set up Flat Dogs on what used to be an old crocodile farm where they used to farm crocodiles, and Flat Dogs is the nickname for a crocodile. So they replaced the crocodile farm with Flat Dogs, which was then just a campsite, and that was in 1992. So yeah, it comes from the fact that it used to be on an old crocodile farm.
Do you get many international guests asking you that same question?
Yeah, we do. And it's on our logo. I'm not sure how much of our logo you can see on my shirt, but there's quite a subtle sort of reference to a crocodile.
So tell me, have you had any instances with crocodiles in that area?
Not really, no, not us or our guests. Crocodiles are, they're plentiful. There's thousands of crocodiles in the Luangwa River and the lagoon systems that surround the Luangwa. We see them every day. But, crocodiles generally don't stray too far from water. So as long as you stay out of the water, you're pretty safe. But this time of year, when lagoons are filling up and, rivers are flowing faster, you do sometimes see crocodiles moving from the river to a lagoon, and you'll see them walking on land, but they're not comfortable on land, so they tend not to attack things on land. But sadly, we do lose a few fishermen every year who make their living from fishing the Luangwa River, and occasionally there'll be an accident and a little canoe, Makoro traditional canoe, might tip over or something. So there is terribly sadly sometimes incidents with local people, but we never have any issues with crocodiles.
Yeah, I must attest to the fact that there's some rather big ones there in the river, isn't there?
Absolutely. And when you see, we've got the biggest hippo population in the world in the Luangwa River, and even in good years, obviously hippos die because, everything dies, and you see a dead hippo in the river, and that's when you realize how many crocodiles there are, because suddenly there are literally hundreds around these dead hippos. So yeah, there's plenty of them, and there's some big ones.
Adrian, tell me a little bit about the property, what it encompasses, what can you offer guests?
So we're an owner-run property. We live on camp. This is my house at camp where I'm talking to you from. So myself, Jess, and our business partner, Paolo, all live here, and we're here on a daily basis. So it's very much a sort of feels like a homely place. We make everyone feel at home, and we get a lot of return guests because of that. We have quite a different variety of accommodation, right from private houses, which are our sort of top-end properties. So we've got the Crocodile Nest, which is a 3-bedroom private tented house house with a private pool. And then we've got the tree house, which is a dry season product only, which is 2 ensuite bedrooms. And then we've got brick chalets, which are for people that might want a bit more security when they're staying. If they may have kids, we do take kids. We take kids of all ages. And then we have our sort of Meru style safari tents, which are again all ensuite, all fully powered and very, very nice and looking onto the Luangwa. So there's sort of 4 different types of accommodation, and it's quite a relaxed atmosphere. We focus on our standards of what we do and our standards of safari. So we really focus on the safari experience, the wildlife experience. So our guides are some of the best guiding teams in Zambia and hence probably Africa. And we've got an a la carte restaurant, which is unusual. So we have a lot of flexibility over times and what you can order when you eat in our restaurant. So it's all about giving guests what they want and when they want it, and giving them products of a high standard and great service.
So if guests come from a walking safari after 5 in the afternoon and they're a bit peckish, you're happy to serve them something if they want something, right?
Yeah, and that really suits families well, because sometimes we have kids who want to come back early from a game drive, from a safari, and and feed the kids early, and that means we can do that. So yeah, it's really flexible in that sense. But also some people come back from their morning safari, walk or drive, and might want to go and have a snooze before having lunch. And there's no sort of set times for buffets and things. It's all, you order off a menu and you get what you order. And that's all included in our inclusive price, which includes your safaris, your accommodation, your food, park fees and conservation fees. So it's that sort of bistro style restaurant. It's just like eating in a restaurant, and it's a really nice atmosphere.
So you mentioned 3 or 4 different kinds of accommodation. Do those come at 3 or 4 different rates, or do you have one rate that goes across the board?
No, we have everything. Some of our tents, we've got 3 smaller tents, which are our sort of cheaper accommodation, the best value. And we often have single travelers who would stay in those smaller tents, or people that want to stay for a long time. So, when you pay a single supplement in the smaller tent, it still works out cheaper than going into one of the luxury tents. So we have the smaller tents we call classic tents, and they're still plenty big enough, and they've still got ensuite facilities. With single supplement, they're still cheaper than if you go into what we call our luxury tents, which are bigger, and the only real difference is they have tea and coffee making facilities, and they're slightly bigger really, so there's not much difference. Then we have the chalets, which are slightly cheaper than the tents and often suit families. Then the 2 private houses, the tree house is the next sort of level, and then the croc's nest is our top end. But all our prices in high season range from about $300 per person per night up to about $600. We've actually won Best Value Safari Property in Africa in the Safari Awards a couple of times, and because we're owner run, we're very hands-on.
There's a push nowadays towards sustainability, renewable energy. Can you tell me what you're doing in that sphere?
So Jess, my wife, was involved with a Dutch-funded program called the CBI, and they came to Zambia and helped small businesses do more business in the European market. But part of it was they gave some lessons and things on how to become more sustainable, as well as marketing and things. So she did a sort of 2-year program, and in November 2024, we got the first ever property in Zambia to become Fair Trade Tourism certified. So we got certification last year, and in a year before, we invested in a big solar system. So we get 80% of our power now through renewable energy. We buy a lot of produce locally. We have very good relationships with local farmers and local producers of all sorts of things, from furniture, thatching. At the moment, we've got quite a bit of thatching going on in camp, and we buy the grass locally and we employ local people to do it. So all those things added to our ability to get certified for fair trade tourism. And it was quite a process, I tell you, to get that certification. It was a long, old process, but we found it really valuable, and we're very proud to have got that. It's very important to us.
You just mentioned that you employ locals to do the thatching. I'm assuming most of the staff complement are locals in the area, and obviously these people have families. So what do you do in terms of helping these families?
Yeah, so we employ 76 people, and they're all local people, all from the villages around us, right up to director level. So our Director of Human Resources and Community Projects is a Zambian guy, Harold Shumbulmuntu, who's been with us for 20 years, and he's worked his way up. It's all local people whose salaries go into the local economy, so none of that goes out to a city or a town anywhere else. On top of what we do with our employees, and I'll come back a little bit to what we do with our employees, we also support conservation and community organisations. So I'm on the board of an organisation called Project Luangwa, and we set that up about 15 years ago with a couple of other safari lodges, and focus is education and improving the education standards in the area, because we recognise that our staff came through that system and their kids are going through that system as well. So we put infrastructure into schools, into government schools. So we've built many classrooms, lots of boarding houses. We have now a DigiLearn process going on in 7 schools, giving kids better access to IT. An early years reading program going on in 8 primary schools. So we're really focused on the education and not only for our staff, but all the people in the local area benefit from the tourism industry. But yeah, our staff are well looked after. We gave bicycles to another 10 of our staff who have been with us 10 years or more, and that's now 47 of our staff. So they've been with us a long time, and I think that says a lot about what they think of us as an employer. We help them with school fees and things like that. So yeah, it feels like a big family. Several of our safari guides have now kids, and Harold, who's the director, have kids in universities in Zambia, and they've been able to do that because of their work in the tourism industry. You know, there's no way they would have been able to afford to send their kids to the university in Zambia. So we're very proud of that.
It's a good feeling of giving back, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And making such a difference. You recognise, you know, you lived in places like this. It makes such a difference. A job is more than a job. You know, it really is a livelihood. And when you say a livelihood, it's everything to these people. You know, it really is. You make such a difference in an area where there's very little else. You know, we're the biggest economy in the area. The only other big economy is subsistence farming. So, you know, we really are offering a professional skill to many people to get into the tourism industry. And yeah, it feels great.
You've been in the game for so long. You've obviously seen many different people come and go, and there must have been a funny moment that happened to you or one of your guests. Do you want to chip in with a funny moment? And you don't have to mention any names, but you know, something that someone's going to laugh about when they listen to it.
There have been lots, some of which probably I shouldn't talk about, but there's a couple that come to mind. One is when I first got here, I was sort of fairly new to the area, about 20 odd years, 23 years ago or something, and I did something that didn't please the chief particularly well. I'm not sure what I did, but I was obviously not very experienced in how you work with the local chief, and I got summoned to his court, and I was sat down in the middle, and I was told I was insubordinate to the chief, so my fine was to go and get him 6 live goats, and they had to all be female because obviously he wanted to breed from them. So I'm sent off, and obviously word went round the village that this Mzungu was going to be in the village in the market for goats, so the price of goats sort of tripled in the next 2 hours, and I managed to find 6 goats, but the only vehicle I had at the time was a pickup, so I put them in the back of the pickup and I drove back down to the chief, and on the way down there one of the goats jumped out, so I turned up with my 5 goats and gave them to the chief and apologised for losing one, which he had a good old giggle about. We sort of shook hands and I said, yeah, sorry, I won't do it again, whatever I did. And it was nothing serious. It was, didn't greet him properly or something, but he taught me a lesson, and he actually came to our wedding about 4 years later. So we still see him, and he's still the chief of the Kunda people in this area. So funny things like that happen, and you always have a laugh about them over a beer sometimes.
And you're still married.
And we're still married.
Adrian, what do you do when you want to get away? I know you have a holiday planned. Tell me
do.
a little bit about where do you like to go? What does Adrian and Jessica like to do?
So we're about as far away from the sea as you can get in Africa. So sometimes just before Christmas, actually, we pop down to Cape Town for a week, and we love going to the Cape because we can eat seafood and spend a bit of time by the sea and go to shops because we don't really have very many shops here. So it's quite nice, especially for Jess, to get into a few shops and things. But actually tomorrow we leave here and we're going off for a tour of Vietnam with some other friends who are in the safari industry. So we're getting out of Africa, but we're doing a trip around Vietnam, going into some of the national parks and things. So a bit of a combination between the two is get into a city, and we love food. One of the reasons we have an a la carte restaurant in our camp is because Jess and I both love food. We both love cooking. So cities because we love going out and eating out in good restaurants, but also going to places like Vietnam, and we have never been before, but we're really looking forward to the sort of slightly wilder areas of Vietnam to see a bit of wildlife and habitat and stuff like that. And we'll do some cooking courses. So everywhere we go, we've been to India, we've been to Thailand, we've done them in France, in the UK. We'll do a cooking course. Might only be an afternoon, sometimes it's 2 or 3 days, and we'll bring those things back to our chefs in the kitchen and we'll add them to the menu. So we love doing food stuff. But just experiences, going and finding different experiences, and sometimes getting to a city to watch a film or something, But just various stuff. We've done quite a lot of safari stuff in Africa as well. We've been to see gorillas and chimps, and we've been to Ethiopia, so quite varied. But often sort of busman's holiday, but occasionally a big city.
Adrian, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, coming on the podcast, and I wish you well at Flat Dogs Camp. And if I'm ever in the area, I'm coming for lunch because I hear the food's so good. So thank you so much.
Be welcome. It's a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. Doing great. Lovely to chat.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Today we were chatting to Adrian Coley, Managing Director of Flat Dogs Camp in Zambia. Tune in again next week when we will be chatting to Chilea Ndeki, Sales and Marketing Manager of Royal Zambezi Lodge in Zambia, on the banks of the Zambezi River. All the details can be found in the show notes of this episode, or head over to www.wildsunsets.travel/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate the show on Apple Podcasts or drop me an email. My name is Rael Zeev, and consider this. A few years from now, you will not remember how much it cost you, but you will still remember the memories you made. Keep traveling.